This is a quick overview of a structure to serve content using Bootstrap, web components, loading HTML dynamically. So as you can see here, I have a pretty simple starting page. This is index.html. And as you can see, it doesn't really have much. It has a custom element, which is the nav bar. I also have here a target into which I'm going to be loading content. And then I have a script that I am referencing there on line 15. If we go to that file that I have on the next tab, you'll see there that I am loading a number of modules. You can see there imports elements.js, and the other ones I'm actually loading the code and making reference to it. This is very similar to Node.js and where you can import a package. Before I go on to the rest of this file, let's go ahead and take a look at elements, then at paths, then at runner. Elements is much like what it sounds like. It's a collection of elements. For the most part, these are pretty simple elements. There's really just a connected callback, which is part of the structure of custom elements, which defines in the inner HTML the tag that's going to be created or the element that's going to be created. In this case, you can see there that this is nothing more than a Bootstrap nav bar. I have also in here, let's see, a Jumbotron and a welcome. Now there's also the possibility of setting properties, of creating these programmatically. This is a pretty simple definition here, so I'm using something pretty vanilla, pretty straightforward, minimal type of investment into the full richness of the structure. Then I have paths, and the goal for this file is that all of the content that will be loaded onto the side can be given both a map and then a path that for the file that will be loaded. And as you can see here, I have features, cards, login, and all of these are mapped onto HTML files that are in a couple of folders. This is the project. I'm going to upload all of this after this recording. You can see here that I have all those HTML files. This is just vanilla HTML. And then in that last tab, this is the third file that I'm running, I have a runner. Here's where I load a lot of the content that typically goes in the first landing page. I've always hated it. It is too busy, too messy, hard to tell what's going on. And as you can see here, I'm loading both styles and scripts. Because of the asynchronous nature or challenges that can be part of this, I am doing callbacks all the way through. You can see there that I have one that works on styles and basically creates style tags, adds them to the page. The other one loads scripts. And I'm using here some promises and async and wait. Now, at the end of all of this, I return runner, as you can see here. And runner, because it's a promise, we can then use .then back on the root file. So if we go back to init, where it all starts, I load those three, and I have paths now in context on this page. Elements simply define the elements that I'm going to use in the page. And then I have runner, which gives me what I just showed. Then here I'm simply loading paths because I want to see if it in fact is coming, it's getting onto this page and it's in scope. And then I use the .then because we had a promise, right? This calls the init, and the reason for this, there's a certain order that things need to be loaded in, otherwise you run into scope problems. And you can see here that for the rest of this page, I'm creating the navigation system. I'm using a library for paths, and what I'm doing here is a router. And here I define what happens if no path is given or you can't find the path. And here in this part, I define all of the paths. I'm doing that based on the routes. You can see here we define our routes, and this is the default. Sorry, that was not the definition of all. That was just the home. And here we loop through all of those routes and define them within this context. The rest of it is, I think I have, this is just what's going to be the default if you can't find something. And here at this point, we start listening. If you define things after this, you have to do listen again, and this is why it's at the end. The other thing to note as well is that the document gets hidden from the view of the user until everything gets loaded, because otherwise you get these weird flashes, and you can see sort of the document being built, and not truly all of it, but it's messy enough and it doesn't make sense. So I at the very end of all of this, I unhide the document, and you can see that I've hidden it here on line 3. Okay, so that's pretty much the structure. Let me go ahead and run an HTTP server here. I have it at the root. I'm going to enter localhost 8080. And you can see there that I am getting what happened here? For some reason, the nav bar didn't load there at the beginning, but as you can see there, it's loading now every single time. So you can see there here, this is the default content that's being loaded. If you look at the console, you can see how all of this is being loaded or replaced. If I click on features, we can load any of those HTML pages, and I'm going to go ahead and show you the console. And I pressed the wrong button. Let me exit out of here. And here we should start to see when we load pages. Here's the network, and I'm going to go ahead and choose partial, and you can see there that partial was loaded, album was loaded, marketing was loaded. We can go back home, and so you can see this is a pretty dynamic way to author content, to be able to break it up into pieces, to have one definition of an nav bar and styling for everything. And you can then create the pages without having to worry about any of that. So if we were to look, for example, here at features, and here's the home, this is the home page, all it has, and all of it is using Bootstrap styles and structures, but it's really just that part. It's really just the part that defines home. And if we were to look at cards, for example, it is just the card definitions. And if we go back to cards, you can see there that it's just 3 cards. So that should make it much easier. It should also make it easy to parallelize. This is meant just for the website content, the static content. There's no reason why we couldn't create components out of all of these. That would be overkill for the most part. What we're doing is something pretty simple. We can look at this deeper for the structure of the logistics bigger site. But for now, this is a pretty good structure. I'll go ahead and upload the repo and share. Just an additional note, the pages that get loaded dynamically don't need to be HTML only. I'm going to look inside of here of gear. I'm not sure exactly which one it was that I created. Let me take a look. Gear, maybe it's gear? Nope. One of these has JavaScript within it. Maybe this is partial. Let's see. Yep, this is it. So you can see here that I have a sample script block that has an array of cities, and then an HTML variable that generates some HTML there and assigns it to HTML. And then I set that in the inner HTML for the inside div, that it's this one here. So it is possible to do that as well. So if you have some block of HTML that is repeating over and over and you want to be able to just generate it programmatically, the cleanest way to do it would be to create an additional element and do it in a much nicer fashion. But this would work just as well.